Have you ever wondered how humans, across varied cultures and timelines, manage to develop sophisticated languages and express complex ideas? It's a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries, leading to fascinating theories about the intricate interplay between language and cognition. One such theory, proposed by Noam Chomsky, suggests that our ability to use language is innate, hardwired into our brains from birth. But as intriguing as this theory is, it leaves room for further exploration and interpretation. What if the structures of language are not pre-programmed, but rather are a natural outcome of how information organizes itself? What if our cognitive abilities are not just recipients of these structures, but active participants in recognizing and employing them? These are the questions that a new perspective brings to the table. So, strap in and prepare to delve into a journey that redefines our understanding of language and cognition. Noam Chomsky, a renowned linguist, proposed that language structures are pre-programmed in our brains. This perspective, known as the Chomskyan theory of language, posits that our ability to comprehend and use language is innate. According to Chomsky, we're all born with a universal grammar hardwired into our brains, a sort of linguistic blueprint that guides us as we learn to speak and understand language. Imagine it as a pre-installed app in our cognitive smartphone. This app, as Chomsky suggests, comes with a set of default settings, a universal grammar that is common across all languages. It's what allows a child in Tokyo to learn Japanese as effortlessly as a child in New York learns English. Both are tapping into the same underlying structures, the same universal grammar to decode the languages they are exposed to. But it's not just about learning languages. Chomsky's theory also asserts that this universal grammar shapes the way we construct sentences, influencing the syntax and rules we naturally adhere to. This innate language ability, Chomsky argues, is what sets us humans apart from other species. It's what allows us to communicate complex ideas, to express abstract thoughts, to discuss the past and the future, and to create an infinite number of sentences from a finite set of words. However, as compelling as Chomsky's theory might be, it has its critics. Some argue that it downplays the role of cultural and social factors in language learning and use. Others question the existence of a universal grammar, pointing to the vast diversity of languages and their structures. And then, there's a new perspective that challenges this notion, suggesting an alternative that aligns with our understanding of cognition. This perspective proposes that language structures are not so much pre-programmed in our brains, but rather, they are a natural consequence of the way information inherently organizes itself. And it's our cognitive abilities that help us recognize and employ these patterns in language. This view positions language not as a static inborn feature, but as a fluid, evolving system shaped by the interplay between universal information patterns and human cognitive skills. This fresh perspective posits that language structures are a natural consequence of the way information inherently organizes itself. This is a departure from the traditional viewpoint that language is pre-programmed in the human brain. Instead, it's suggested that humans, through their cognitive abilities, are adept at recognizing and employing these patterns in language. There are three main elements to this perspective: information structure, cognitive pattern recognition, and language expression. Let's dive into these. Firstly, information structure. This refers to the fundamental universal patterns that underlie all forms of information. These patterns are not limited to language alone, but extend to various forms of data and knowledge representation. It's like the blueprint of all information, the underlying framework that holds everything together. Next, we have cognitive pattern recognition. This is the human ability to identify, understand, and utilize these patterns. It's a broader cognitive skill that goes beyond language acquisition. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns, and this ability plays a crucial role in how we process and understand different stimuli. Finally, language expression. This is the actual process of using language to communicate. It involves applying recognized patterns to convey ideas effectively. It's the tangible, practical application of our cognitive abilities and knowledge of information structures. These three elements don't exist in isolation. They interact in dynamic ways. The fundamental structure of information influences our cognitive pattern recognition, which then guides how we express language. The use of these patterns in language, in turn, reinforces the fundamental structure of information. Moreover, the fundamental structure of information can directly influence language expression, potentially bypassing some aspects of cognitive pattern recognition. Engaging in language expression can also enhance cognitive pattern recognition skills. Without these fundamental information structures, language expression would lack coherence and universality. This theory suggests a more dynamic interaction between information structures, cognitive abilities, and language development. It presents language not as a static inborn feature, but as a fluid, evolving system, shaped by the interplay between universal information patterns and human cognitive skills. This perspective opens up exciting new avenues for understanding the nature of language and cognition. Now let's put this theory to test through 4 different models. Our first model is the reinforcement model. It suggests that the fundamental structure of information guides our pattern recognition, which then influences our language expression. For instance, think of a child who is learning to speak. The child is exposed to language patterns in the form of sentences and phrases. As they continue to hear these patterns, it shapes their understanding and use of language. Simultaneously, the use of these patterns in their language further reinforces the fundamental structure of information. Next, we have the causal model. Here, the structure of information essentially causes humans to develop pattern recognition abilities tailored to these structures. This, in turn, leads to the effective use of language. If we were to remove this fundamental information structure, language expression would be less systematic and coherent. Imagine trying to assemble a puzzle without having the image on the box as a guide. It would be considerably more challenging, right? The same principle applies here. The third model, the nonlinear model, suggests an interesting possibility. It proposes that the inherent structure of information might directly influence language expression, even bypassing some aspects of cognitive pattern recognition. To visualize this, consider how poetry often breaks traditional language rules to create impactful expressions. Even though the language patterns might seem unconventional, the underlying information structure can still resonate with us, influencing our language comprehension and expression. Lastly, we have the harmonic model. This model presents a more holistic view, showing how the interplay of information structure, cognitive pattern recognition, and language expression can lead to a deeper understanding of information. It's like a symphony orchestra where each musician plays a different instrument, but together they create a harmonious sound. The interaction of these elements can reveal deeper insights into the fundamental structure of information. Each of these models provides a lens through which we can examine the dynamic interaction between the structure of information, cognitive abilities, and language development. Whether it's through the systematic reinforcement of patterns, the causal influence of information structures, the nonlinear impact on language expression, or the harmonic interplay of all elements, these models help us understand the fluid and evolving nature of language. In essence, these models suggest that language isn't a static, inborn feature, but a fluid, evolving system shaped by the interplay between universal information patterns and human cognitive skills. It's like a river that's constantly reshaping its course, influenced by the terrain it flows through. Similarly, language evolution and individual language development are both reflective and contributive to our broader understanding of information structure. These models demonstrate the fluid and evolving nature of language, shaped by the interplay between information patterns and human cognitive skills. The implications of this theory are far-reaching. By repositioning language not as an innate feature, but as a dynamic system shaped by the interplay between universal information patterns and cognitive skills, we can better understand the evolution of language. This perspective sees language development as a fluid process, constantly evolving in response to the patterns we perceive and utilize in our environment. Consider the evolution of language. The rise of new words, the shift in syntax, the changes in pronunciation. These are not random occurrences. They are a reflection of our ability to adapt to the fundamental structures of information. As we recognize and internalize these patterns, we shape our language to better align with them, perpetuating a cycle of adaptation and refinement. Individual language development, too, can be viewed through this lens. As a child grows and learns, they are not simply absorbing vocabulary and grammar rules. They are actively recognizing and applying patterns in the information they encounter. This active engagement facilitates their understanding and mastery of language, reflecting the dynamic interaction between cognitive pattern recognition and language expression. Now let's turn to convergent and parallel scientific discoveries. Think of instances where researchers around the world working independently arrive at similar conclusions or make identical discoveries. This is not mere coincidence. It suggests that there are fundamental patterns or structures in the information that guide human thought in similar directions. Science, like language, is a system of organizing and conveying information. The occurrence of these convergent discoveries provides compelling evidence that our cognitive abilities are influenced by the inherent structure of information, which in turn shapes our language and knowledge creation. This theory elegantly ties the structure of information to human cognition and language creation. It offers a comprehensive understanding of how we perceive, process, and express information, and in doing so, it opens up new avenues for exploring the intricate interplay between cognition, language, and the world around us. As we reach the end of our exploration, we see how this perspective reshapes our understanding of language and cognition. We've journeyed through a landscape of theories and models, each one illuminating a different facet of the intricate relationship between language, cognition, and the fundamental structure of information. Our path began with Noam Chomsky's iconic theory, which proposed that language structures are pre-programmed in the human brain. But as we ventured further, a new perspective began to emerge. One that suggests that language structures are not so much pre-programmed, but rather a natural consequence of the way information inherently organizes itself. The human brain, with its remarkable cognitive abilities, is simply adept at recognizing and employing these patterns in language. We delved into the elements of this revised framework, starting with information structure, the universal patterns that underlie all forms of information. Then, we examined cognitive pattern recognition, the human ability to identify, understand, and utilize patterns. Finally, we explored language expression, the actual process of using language to communicate. Through various models, we saw how these elements interact in a dynamic dance. We discovered how the fundamental structure of information influences our cognitive pattern recognition, and how this recognition in turn guides our language expression. We also considered how the absence of a fundamental information structure could lead to less coherent and systematic language expression. Furthermore, we observed how the use of language, in turn, reinforces the fundamental structure of information. This suggests a harmonious feedback loop where language and cognition continually influence and shape each other. Finally, we discussed the implications of this new perspective and found compelling support in the phenomenon of convergent and parallel scientific discoveries. These instances suggest that there are indeed underlying patterns in information that guide human thought towards similar conclusions. And so, we find ourselves looking at language not as a static inborn feature, but as a fluid, evolving system shaped by the dance of cognition and information structure.